Hey there's ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Blue Grit Radio. This is your host Eric, and I'm joined by Morgan Plascencia, mindset coach. Morgan, can you say hello and introduce yourself real quick?
Hello. Yes, of course. I'm Morgan Plascencia. I am a master mindset and empowerment coach and first responder support counselor. So I work primarily with women, but I do mindset coaching, empowerment coaching, and work with first responders in that mindset of if they're doing a side hustle, a side business, moving up in the ranks in their profession and the career. I'm here to help them along the way.
Awesome. So we've talked before, but can you share with the listeners what your connection with first responder life is?
Absolutely. Well, I'm a fire wife, as we've talked about. Um, so very intimate, close connection to what that life is like.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in New York, and my brother-in-law is NYPD, and grew up around state troopers and that kind of thing. So always kind of had close contact with family members or very dear friends that were first responders, and now moved here and married one.
Yeah. So what was that like coming from police family to marry a firefighter?
Well, seeing my sister's life married to a police officer was a little bit different. I have to say, even just as a first responder counselor, I definitely see a difference in the scheduling and the normalcy of the day to day in life for
Oh
sure.
yeah.
Um, my husband is 96 a lot. You and I were kind of spitballing about that in our
Yeah.
conversation. So he's at work for 4 days, 4 nights at a time. And so it's a little bit different in acclimating as a family to any semblance of a schedule. With that said, as you know, police officers are held to, there's, real no rhyme or reason a lot of the time for scheduling. But that's probably the biggest thing. The hardest part is I noticed my husband as a firefighter is really tapped physically, mentally, just the workload, the scheduling
Yeah.
is pretty crazy.
Yeah, for sure. And so like, we were talking about just shift work and long shifts and getting mandated over, right? So if you're working a 10 or 12-hour day as a cop and then you get held, another 4 or 5 hours, but it's very different when you are regularly gone for 4 days,
Yeah.
right? Like just gone from the household. So as a first responder spouse, what have you found that's helpful for you and for your family that you would share from either new firefighters, new cops, or for the families that might be listening?
I think from both sides. So just as a spouse, for me, something that helps me and may seem obvious, but it's a little bit difficult with the ambiguity of his schedule. But having my own thing, having my own hobbies, things that I enjoy, things that I can dive into while he's away, um, and having a point of contact with him daily is really important. So every morning we touch base, every evening we touch base, and if we have little texts back and forth in the day, that's awesome. But I know without a doubt, every morning we're going to have a text conversation or a phone call, and every evening we're going to have a text conversation and a phone call. So that makes things nice and easy as far as like communicating about what's going on at the house or just our day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, from the standpoint of a spouse, if there's any new firefighters, new police officers looking for tips, I'd have to say my husband has mastered communication. Like he is great at finding even just the 5 seconds, and this is catered more to the fire service. But if he's
Mm-hmm.
going to be out on a fire, he'll text me just simply fire. And that way I know if I don't hear from him for 4 or 5 hours, he's okay. He's just dealing with that, or I'll know to like check in with him, make sure he's safe, he's okay. But those little points of contact, the little just keeping your spouse in the loop when they're at home
Mm-hmm.
is so helpful because we worry. We
Yeah.
definitely, and we miss you, of course, but obviously we're worried about your safety.
Yeah, I think that's great. So what I hear is themes of being intentional, right? Setting
Mm,
routines where you can, and even communicating the right expectations, right? So, um, texting a simple word, fire, or even if he flubs it, right, it's like FI send.
yes, and that's
Um,
happened.
yeah, or it says fine. Like that's okay, autocorrect. But
Yes.
you probably you're like, okay, don't get spooked, don't get weirded out if he doesn't text back for hours or the greater part of the shift, right? It could be a big thing, but man, I think that that's a good point to focus in on is for all the first responders, like your spouse, your family is not there. So similar to like dispatch, like when you can't see what's happening, you start to think of like the worst case scenario. So I think that's a great little tidbit just to keep in mind as you're adjusting to this lifestyle.
Totally. The key word there is intentionality for sure. Just being really intentional with your communication and keeping in mind, my husband has and everyone, every first responder, we don't know what they're dealing with in the moment, right? Like something really horrible could have just happened and that's on his mind, or he could just be
Mm-hmm.
physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, emotionally exhausted. And at the same time, there are people in the fire service, police force, all of the things where they don't know what's going on at home. And I know some spouses that were up all night with a newborn or have three sick kids or, the husband's dad's in the hospital with cancer or something. So both ends, you aren't there. You don't see what's going on with each other. So just being very intentional and compassionate in your communication is really, really helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we're gonna dive into what it is you do. So Morgan, the mindset coach, and those that follow me know that I think mindset is crucial. I don't think I was strong-minded, as a young man. It's something I've been intentional about. I've had the benefit of many mentors and teachers and just role models, but I mean, mind over everything. So
Mhm.
can you tell us what a mindset coach does and how you came into this role?
Absolutely. So, when you and I were chatting, I started out as a business coach, as a business mentor. I had my own business and it was wildly successful very fast. And I had people just approaching me asking how I did it. What did you do? How does this work? How do I dive
Mm-hmm.
in? And I was doing it for free for a little bit. It was just a passion of mine. I enjoyed helping people. And after a while, I started to need a calendar. I started to needed to book myself. And um, in that, I decided to get my life coaching certification, which I did, and started taking on clients as a life coach. And that's an awesome profession, really cool, really amazing. However, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper. So I took some
Mm-hmm.
courses on mindset work, mindset coaching, deep coaching, relational coaching, and started primarily working with my clients on mindset only. So when people sign on to work with me, one of my big programs is called Reframe. And so what we do there is a lot of perspective shift and reframing the relationship you have with yourself, the relationship you have with money in your career, the way you make decisions. We get into our thoughts become our feelings become our desires become our actions, learning about how we can change our thoughts, change our life. And you talk about that a lot too, but just really getting down to focusing on the way that we think, the way that we talk to ourselves, the way we talk to other people, and how that can catapult us into a completely different reality.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that perspective shift is like literally the outlook you want to bring to something. Um, we often hear about those that encourage us to find solutions with our problems, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
how can we reframe a problem into a challenge, something that we can overcome rather than just something to complain about. Um, what are your thoughts on how someone could get better at that approach or work on that?
That approach meaning being more like solution oriented in
Yeah,
their approach. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and just being more positive with how they look at, maybe a challenge or adversity and look at it as an opportunity.
That's a great question. There's a few things, right? I think first and foremost, I preach this all the time, and I know it may sound cliche to some, but gratitude, come from a place of gratitude. People think joyfulness creates gratitude, and it's the opposite. Our gratitude creates joy.
Mm.
So, the more that we can sit in a space of gratitude and be grateful, and I'm not talking about a space of toxic positivity where, you're making everything great even when it's not, but being
Yeah.
grateful for the things in your life that do fulfill you and do make you feel good. Also, realizing that life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you, and coming from that approach with things of, okay, this didn't work out, but what can? It's this or it's something better, right? And I
Hmm.
think the more we sit back and really take an inventory of our thoughts and from a non-judgmental space, but just looking at what we're thinking, why we're thinking that, and how it would feel to think something different. A lot of my clients have a lot of self-limiting beliefs, so it's a big one with my first responders is I can only make this much money doing what I'm doing,
Mhm.
and that's a prison. Like how would it feel to think something different? And then they kind of think that through and okay, well, maybe I can make this much money over here, but I could do this on the side, or I could start this business, or I could go for this position. And just broadening your spectrum and understanding we live in a world of infinite possibility. There's no chalkboard in the sky that says this is your limit at all. So being a bit more gentle with yourself, not judging yourself, and taking inventory of your thoughts. What limits are you putting on yourself?
Yeah, I love that. Right? It's like, okay, so to entertain the side hustle, because yeah, when we sign on for a government job or a public safety job, it literally has a range of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
A salary or a wage, and it says this to this,
Right.
right? So you can project your highest earning, and that's generally no no promotion. That's generally just, hey, if I'm here longer and longer, this is what I can stand to make. So I think just that recognition, right, is huge to say, hey, you don't have to be painted in this box. Um, what do you think is helpful for people to think about if they start entertaining that option to say, hey, I can be something outside of this job. Although I love it, like I could explore something new.
Yeah, I love that. And I have a lot of clients that are going through that. So, a question I ask a lot of the time is number one, what are you good at? That's
Hmm.
important, right? What are you good at? Even in the job, what are you great at doing? Are you really good at talking to people? Are you really great at making people feel comfortable? Are you quick to find a solution for a problem? What are your strengths? What areas do you excel in? And what do you love to do? If money was not an issue, if no one would be mad, if nothing would be wrong, what would you want to do every day? And when you put those two next to each other, sometimes, more often than not, you can find an exact, oh, this is something I'd want to do. Or nine times, I have to say, a lot of the time we know exactly what we want to do and what we want to be doing. We're just more concerned with the dynamics around it. Like, what will people think? Or
Hmm.
how much can I really make with that? Or, but I'm a police officer. Why do this is actually a client of mine. I'm a police officer, but why do I want to start planning events on the side?
Mm.
How does that make sense? It doesn't have to make sense. If you know you're
Yeah.
good at coordinating things, if you know you enjoy that, you enjoy party planning, you enjoy doing XYZ, why can't you do that and be a law enforcement officer? Why does it have to be this or that? Again, a world of infinite possibility. There's
Yeah.
it doesn't have to look the way that everybody else thinks it needs to look at all.
Yeah, and I think that like maybe this is jumping out at me because I'm wearing a training hat now, and so I think that you hear that frequently in first responders, whether it's fire, my friends in fire, and police and corrections. I mean, oftentimes it's cited that when they ask why don't we do things this way, it's the adage, oh, it's because it's how it's always been done. Um, and we can roll our eyes at that, but some organizations have a harder time and some people have a harder time with that. So I think that is like a very valuable theme to think about is just where can you go with this and why do you put these constraints on yourself just because it's what everyone else has done before you and why not, right?
Yeah, a question I ask my clients in my reframe program, I have my clients do some journaling. And the question that always helps them with this breakthrough is what assumed standards of growth do you subscribe to?
Mm,
And what I mean by that, I'll give you my personal example, was when I opened my store, I heard from everyone. I owned a women's boutique showroom. And so I heard from everyone, like, you're not going to make money the first 3 years you're open. You're not going to make money. All the money's going to go back in the business. Don't expect to make a profit. But. I heard all of it from everywhere. But I'm not the type of girl that listens very well. So
mm,
I just stuck to my own thing. Like, just because you didn't make money doesn't mean I won't. Or just because this is how it looked before doesn't mean I can't do something different. And sure enough, I ran my numbers the first month and I made more money than some stores make in a year of business.
wow.
But I didn't listen to that standard of growth. I didn't
Yeah.
I didn't adhere to that conditioning. So asking yourself that question, what assumed standards of growth are you subscribing to in your life, can really open your eyes to, hold on a second, like, why do I think this? Is this ultimately true?
Yeah. How do you toggle that abundant mindset with something that's realistic and responsible? Because some people are dreamers, right? And
Right. Yeah.
you don't have to talk them into having a positive mindset, and you maybe have to even curb them the other way.
I think it's one of those things where, again, asking the question, is it ultimately true?
Hmm.
Because when we take things too far and you ask, is it ultimately true? That kind of puts you back in the box a little bit, right?
Sure.
Looking at your circumstances, looking at what's going on. And because I could say, I want to go to Fiji right now. Is it possible? I don't know if that's ultimately true. I have a child. I have, a business. I couldn't necessarily leave right this very moment. Could I
Yeah.
go to Fiji in a week? Yeah, absolutely. Of course, that could
Yeah.
work. So really putting things into perspective, that yes, we live in a world of infinite possibility. We can do damn near anything, but we have to look at our responsibilities, what's important to us, and getting down to core value. And that's another thing that is really important with the first responders that I work with, balancing their schedule. Again, I work primarily with women. So with women, I have a lot of the balancing, like dating life,
Hmm.
work schedule, if they have children, what that looks like, and getting down to your core values. What is important to you? What do you prioritize? Because if you prioritize saving money, or if you're prioritizing buying a home, if you're prioritizing opening this business and you need this much in the bank, obviously that's going to help you shift the perspective of what makes sense right now. It doesn't mean don't dream big, but it means, dream big, but look at what's going on and honor your priorities, honor what's important to you, and honor your responsibilities. We want to be people of integrity. We don't want to be floating around in a crazy way.
Yeah. No, that's huge. And so I want to come back to you working primarily with women.
Mhm.
Um, but one thought I just want to share with the listeners, going back to mindset, and you're talking about all these awesome ideas that people should keep in mind, but that self-limiting belief, or hey, is this true? I think that's huge, right? And so for whatever reason, I got this really strong image of me starting field training, my first field trainer, and he was like the senior field training officer, but he told me a couple lessons, and you probably can recognize why these were so iconic and in not so great ways. But my first lesson was that everyone lies,
Hmm.
and my second lesson was everyone's stupid. And what he meant was everyone on the street, everyone that you interact with. And
Yeah.
so here I am, super impressionable, and um, I knew it was not literal, but I also knew he was trying to impress a lesson. But I mean, here I am starting as a new police officer. I'm like, okay, now like literally everyone's going to lie to me, or they're going to be too dumb, and so they won't know that they're lying to me. And it's basically how it was portrayed to me. Um, but yeah, what kind of framework is that? Is the young Eric coming into to learn this job, this vocation he knows nothing about in this field he wants to be successful in, and the senior, very experienced veteran officer is telling me these things. Um, but then to flip to personal life, he taught me two more lessons, which was, or two more pieces of advice, which were never get married and never have kids. And so again, it was a really cynical remark or remarks to how tough it is for first responders to have healthy relationships.
Yeah.
But man, what a man, acidic and kind of a negative way, not kind of, but very negative way to relay that concern. Um, but I hear that a lot, right? I hear it's impossible to have a good relationship, or you're fraught, you're bound for divorce because first responder life, whether fire, corrections, dispatches is fraught with that. So I think it is mindful just to, of course, I use the word mindful, but I think we need to be real with that, right? We can hear these things, but we need to say, hey, that might have been a trend. That might be something that we should be aware of. But we have all this appropriate strategy and planning intentionality that will catapult us through that.
Absolutely. And I think this is just playing into how important mental health and coaching or counseling or whatever that looks like for you as a first responder. It's critical because you're just building these walls that keep everything that we truly want in our human experience away, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to ask what you want for your life and know that you can have that. Again, there's no chalkboard in the sky saying you can't.
Mm-hmm.
And relationships in general are hard, right? I mean, marriage is not easy. And of course, the life of a first responder makes that a little more taxing for sure. But I think understanding that with the right tools, the right help, the right attitude, not going into it with that mindset. And moreover, most of the first responders I know get into this profession because they have a genuine love for people and they want to protect people and they want
Mm-hmm.
to serve. And they love adrenaline, right? It's a nice little cocktail. So,
Yeah.
but with that, when you're faced with other people in the service or the department or whatever that are saying everyone's stupid, this, that, and the other, you've lost your luster.
Yeah.
You've lost your, like, why were you here in the first place? Why did you
Mm-hmm.
want to get in? And I think it's fair to say, and I hear this with my clients that are in, the police force or fire, at some point it comes down to using that advice. My quote fingers are up, but using that advice as a reminder. Don't forget why you started.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't forget your why. Don't, if you're approaching the streets and people with this attitude of everyone's stupid and everyone lies, you're missing out on opportunities to truly serve, to truly honor, to truly make a difference, to truly make someone feel better. In my first responder counseling, they said, and this really resonated because I'm a coach. So for me, I sign up to see everyone's wins. Like, I want to see everybody doing their best, starting their businesses, hitting their goals, doing the things that make them smile, that light them up. I sign up to see the best moments in people's lives, and I love it. As a first responder, you're signing up to see the scariest, worst, most. So to remember that you're by someone's side during a piece or a day or an hour that they're going to remember forever.
Yeah.
Your reaction, your kindness, or your rudeness, or your jaded, whatever it is, whatever you're bringing to them, that's there forever. So I would just invite those people that are in that situation or dealing with veteran officers or trainers or whatever that looks like to use that. Put it in the back of your mind is don't forget your why. Don't forget your energy. Don't forget your passion for people. Don't forget how much you want to be doing what you're doing and why you want to be there, and be the difference. Be the person that shows love and respect, and to the people in the streets and to each other. Because if you think about it, that was a moment for you too that was really, really impressionable, and
Yeah.
and that's
And it,
there.
yeah, absolutely. And I was, I came in with, I wanted to change the world and I wanted to, help save the world. And I do think that first responders do that as a team, right? You can't change everything, and we are all necessary parts of this society, right? It's first responders, it's teachers, it's coaches, it's mentors like yourself, it's thought leaders. Like, we're gonna do it together. It's not on any one person, but at the same time, I know that there are officers that sound like my first field trainer, right? And I know that a lot of them care; they still do, but they show up in this cynical way, and some of it's self-preservation and putting walls up, and the cynicism, right? All these things, compassion fatigue, but it doesn't do any good. Like, every time you think it and verbalize it and allow someone else to hear it, whether it's a joke or not, and like, don't get me wrong, I have plenty of sarcastic jokes, but you are feeding into this energy, right? And so I think that's been a pleasant surprise gift, is that working in hiring where people want to hear my why frequently, and I want to hear people's why. Why do they want to come into this highly scrutinized, dangerous job? And it does fuel me, right? So I do love that you went there as far as remembering your why or challenging and using it as a reminder, because I do think that it's an exercise that could be so powerful for people, especially if they've been on some time, they've seen some things, and they're starting to go down that more cynical, negative road.
Yeah, and I think I just felt really led to say this, so I'm just going to share it. But I
Yeah.
hear the divorce thing a lot, and the those problems with first responder families a lot, even just amongst my friends and my own family. And it's important to remember the problem is not the two of you. The problem isn't the fire service or the police department or whatever. The problem is
Hmm.
it's just the lack of sleep. It's the lack of communication. It's the problem isn't what everyone thinks it is. And if we can put the focus on fixing the issue, like, okay, let's be intentional and have a date night. Let's be intentional and communicate once a day. Let's be intentional and do this. It can really shift the dynamic of your marriage or your family, whatever that looks like. And same with the department interactions with each other. Like, if you can understand that the people are not necessarily always the problem. It's the circumstance. It's you're running up on somebody when they're having the scariest moment they've had ever. Would all of us be
Hmm.
truthful? Maybe not, right? Um,
Yeah.
Maybe you just had a traumatic situation. And I can say from a space of psychology, and I know you can too, people are not going to remember every detail of everything when they've been traumatized. So is it stupidity or is it they were just victim of something and can't it just
Yeah.
reframing the way you see things and not seeing the people as the problem, or just looking at it as, okay, this is outside of us, this is outside of this, let's find the solution over here. And I know that, again, it may sound really basic, but we all move through our day forgetting that. Like, we all move through our day annoyed with a
Hmm.
coworker. I know, I mean, I hear it all the time, in the fire service, people annoyed with their coworkers, or in the police force, there's an issue. And it's like, we're all forgetting everybody's really tired. Like, everybody's maxed out,
Yeah.
especially now. Especially now. I know here
Hmm.
in California, everyone is held, everybody's doing mandos. Like, nobody is themselves right now. And I learned somewhere along the line, I will figure it out and give credit where it's due, but for police officers, they're on shift for 12 hours. Well, it takes 48 hours for them to come out of fight or flight.
Yeah.
So we have guys in
Yeah.
the,
Kevin Gilmartin, Dr. Kelvin Gilmartin is emotional survival for law enforcement. He talks about that roller
okay.
coaster, right, and how long it takes to come down. And yeah, I want to say it's like two or even maybe more than 2 days. And that's like your typical weekend, right?
Right.
So maybe you just get into that space where you can recover and you're back in it.
Yeah, you've had no time. And then for the fire
Hmm.
department, or my husband, for example, he's working 96 hours. That's 384 hours for him to come out of fight or flight. That's 16
Mm.
days off in a row,
Yeah. Yeah.
just to come to equilibrium, just to be stable, status quo. So I think sometimes, in the service and the departments, we could be a little more gentle with each other in knowing we haven't had a second. Like, maybe Tommy over here isn't an a-hole. Maybe he's just super sleep deprived, hasn't eaten breakfast in 2 days, and his wife
Hmm.
is pissed at him because he hasn't been home, right? Like, he might not be the problem. There's a whole other situation. But I think just that cynicism and that the everybody lies, everybody's stupid, this person's a problem. If we step back and really look at it and come from a space of gentleness and compassion, which I know in the field, compassion fatigue is a thing, but we got to exercise that muscle.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're in the people business, and you have to recognize that we're all human, right? We all make mistakes, and no one's above it, and everyone has their unintentional flubs. Whether it's missing a blind spot, and you start to creep into a lane, and then someone lays on the horn, like, okay, we don't need to lay back. It'd be like, okay, my bad. But we see road rage, and we see all these things that kind of permeate into normal life, and if everyone just took a second, right, and just pictured the other driver just being your mom, just having an honest mistake, then we can be a lot more patient. And so whether it's the person that is in crisis, right, that's now annoying you and lying to you, or you just recognize like they are at their worst day, like you said. And that's one thing that I really like to encourage my officers and peers to do is, hey, like, we all have our moments of impatience, but at the end of the day, like, this is our job. We are professionals. Like, we can deal with a little bit of frustrating individuals, right? Maybe maybe they're actually intentionally aggravating us, but you are a paid professional. If you don't want to be here, then thanks for your time. Move on, because it doesn't do anyone any good if you're truly at that point where you don't see any positivity in what you're trying to do, what you're able to do.
Absolutely. And I think that was such a good point. You're the professional, you're the calm in the storm. And I posted a little bit ago about that going around the internet right now, like on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, Twitter. Everyone's like, I'm matching energy now. If somebody is this way to me, I'm going to be that way back. And I did a post saying,
Mm.
we don't match energy. That's trash. What does that even mean? And my exact example was, what if there's a crisis going on and you have your police and fire show up just as chaotic as the rest of you? Is anything getting done?
Mm.
Is anyone? No,
Yeah.
you are literally paid to be the calm in the storm and trained to be so and trained to diffuse things. So I
Yeah.
think that's such a brilliant point and something that needs to be, and it's an honor, it's a privilege to be that for people. When you show up, that it's like, okay, we're going to calm it down.
Yeah, and there's so many people that are trying to get into this job, and maybe they just don't have the right acumen, or maybe they don't have the right time away from making their mistakes, right? But as much as the nation is hurting for good cops and firefighters, there are a lot of people that wish that they could be in your role, right? So I think it's just be a little more humble and be a little more patient and understanding. But I want to be respectful of your time, Morgan, and I did want to jump quickly to you're talking about coaching mostly females, and we certainly need, and I'm glad we're having this conversation on a national level, but we could sure use a lot more females, a lot more women in first responder work and emergency services, law enforcement. I think the national statistic is like 14%. And so do you want to talk a little bit about what kind of things that you often, or trends that you work with your clients as far as being a woman in first responder work?
We talked about this a little bit. I think the issues, I quote fingers are up issues, or the things that my clients deal with a lot, like I said, are really just the balancing of life and
Mm.
balancing the role as a mom or a wife or their dating world and being a woman and being a first responder. Um, I know that clients I've worked with through the process have dealt with just intimidation, or not being
Mm.
able to show up as themselves. And you and I touched on this a bit. Like they feel as though they need to show up with this masculine energy or be a certain way instead of bringing their own, feminine nurturing and their own gifts to the field, which is important and imperative in my opinion. Um, but I think the biggest thing that I work with my first responder clients on is balancing, managing their schedules, and really finding fulfillment as a whole, finding ways to continue to operate in their social life, outside of the department or outside of the police force, and continuing to build their family life. I have some clients where they're a first responder and so is their husband. So we
Mm.
spend a lot of time unpacking what that's like, and again, focusing on their mindset and how they can approach it and how they can bring their best selves to the job and to their family.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you have this skill, this expertise speaking to a specific niche, right? Because I think that balance is huge. And from my noticing the women in my life, and from a young age and being raised by largely my mom, is a key difference in most women. So before anyone gets super mad and triggered, most women have a tendency to need to do everything and excel at everything and bear the weight of everyone more than most men. I've seen many men that they know their specialty, whether it's work or their craft or their whatever, and they're very fine leaving other things to be attended by someone else, right? Whether it's a family member or a team member. So I think that weight is so heavy, and so for you to bring up balance is huge. And this job, or these types of jobs, they are identity shifts. They're so different. You look at the world differently, and so for you to offer that, I think is great, and that empowering. I remember you introed with the theme of empowerment, and yes, like to abandon the narratives and say, yes, this is possible. And no, just because you are a new female police officer doesn't mean you cannot have a dating life and a healthy relationship. All these things. So thank you for doing that and bringing up these
Oh,
topics.
thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, well, I want to be mindful of your time, and I know you have other things slated for the day. So, Morgan, any closing thoughts before you tell the listeners where they can find you?
No, I'm just so grateful to be here and thankful for you and the work that you do. And you're really getting out there and just spreading awareness on so many things that are so important. So I'm so appreciative of that.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think I've noticed it. I'll say just from culture, and it's from all over, right? But we're in the stage where we are talking about bringing more women into first responder work and emergency services. I think it's fantastic. And if you don't, or if you want to make it some other weird agenda or some affirmative action thing, then I think you're missing the point. But I can count on two hands like uh, some of the most capable and competent officers that I've worked personally with, either on my crew or alongside, and a good portion of them are women. And so it's something that I'm glad we're having these conversations. I'm glad there are professionals like yourself that are recognizing that they carry a lot of weight and they carry a lot of, I think, stigmas and these norms that need to be challenged. So thank you again. And Morgan, can you tell the listeners where they can find you or get in contact
Yes,
with
the
you?
best way to find me is on Instagram, and that's at Morgan Kelly Placencia. Plascencia is the last name. Nobody can, I think I told you on the intro,
Oh,
I'm like,
I'll put it in
nobody
the
can
show
ever
notes.
pronounce
Yeah,
that, so don't worry.
you can find it in the show notes. So you can just type it in or copy and paste
Yeah,
it.
awesome. But yeah, that is the best way to find me.
Great. Well, thanks so much again for joining me and joining us, and I appreciate your
Thank you,
time.
Eric.